All right. I am so excited to introduce you to Amy Koop. Amy was a former boot camper, and I met Amy before she started on this journey to become an executive coach. And it's been so much fun to watch her just grow and blossom. And we've had a few opportunities to talk about her journey and just how she's really helping executives and people in so many different ways. And we're really excited for her topic. It's interviewing from the green zone. And Amy and I also talked about like the red zone, the green zone, and we always want to be coming from the green zone. So Amy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Christy. I really appreciate it. And I'm just so excited to be here. Christy, I have to say, I'm such a fan of yours. And so just honored to be a part of anything that you're leading. The community that you've built here is just so extraordinary.
Thank you,
So hats
Amy.
off to you. Yeah, and it's a real service to the community. And so just touches me to be a part of it. As you mentioned, Christy, I am now an executive coach and a meditation and mindfulness instructor. I previously had about 25 years in the corporate world, working at marketing agencies in a variety of functions, sales, operations, and account management. And this topic of green zone, which is AKA navigating stress skillfully, is a topic that has been near and dear to my heart for many years. So I would have considered myself 5 years ago a burned out professional. So I had very demanding job responsibilities, and I didn't have a lot of ways of coping with them. And so I started to I turned inward and started to sort of explore myself and how can I help myself and help my team. I was leading a team at that point. And that led to my becoming interested in coaching and how I could really take what I had learned and expand that to a broader audience. And so I'm just really happy to do a lot of one-on-one coaching and have the opportunity to share some of the things that I've learned in a format like this. So what we're going to be talking about today is, as you mentioned, the green zone, which is essentially the what I like to think of as a response to a stressor or stressful situation. The green zone is when you're able to come to meet that stressor with a sense of calm, confidence, and groundedness. So that would be sort of in contrast to a red zone. And this terminology is borrowed from a clinical psychologist named Dr. Rick Hansen, who's done some amazing work in the field of neuroplasticity. So how our environment and the way that we interact with our environment actually changes our brain structure. And so the practices that we're going to talk about today are ones that actually will help to rewire your brains and how you navigate situations that you find stressful. So just to ground us a little bit so this green zone is really this place that we want to come from when we are interacting with a stressful situation. And I think for this audience, an interview or a presentation or a high stakes, difficult conversation is a great example of a stressor. So it's essentially a stressor in an event that's likely to produce conditions of tension, discomfort, anxiety, even overwhelm. And your stress response is the way that your body activates energy in response to that stressor. And I think that it's really important to kind of double down on that, because when I truly realized that my stress response was my body's way of activating energy and responding to my environment, it really helped me to feel more empowered in the things that I did, and made me realize that there are lots of tools and techniques and practices, mindsets, as well as somatic activities that can help improve that interaction or that the way that my body produces and utilizes energy in response to a stressful situation. So talking a little bit about stress, we're going to dive into the tools pretty quickly. I'm curious if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat, what's in your current stress management toolkit? So when you're faced with a situation where you know that you're likely to feel anxious, overwhelmed, tense, not at your best, what's in your current toolkit? What do you use to navigate that, either in the moment or practices that help you kind of prepare? So Patricia's saying deep breaths, breath work's huge. Yoga, yes. Bill, absolutely. Charles says prepare, for sure. Yeah, coming from that place of knowing that you're grounded in what you're talking about, absolutely. Which is actually not what we're going to be talking about today. So I should say that all of this is on top of, the preparation that presumably you're doing for any conversation like this. Talking to my spouse, yeah, talking it through, breathing, breath work, lots of breath work fans, walking outside. Oh, nature is so good for the nervous system. Prayer, yes. Contemplative practices, meditation and awareness, great. Let's take a minute and ground ourselves in our own individual green zone. It's going to look a little bit different for everyone, but essentially it is this place of calm groundedness. And so we're going to start with the body. And for those of you who have a meditation or mindfulness practice, this will probably be familiar. For those that don't, it's just a little dip into a posture that is a meditative tool or practice. So I think most of you are sitting down. If you're standing, that's fine. This still works, but I'm sitting. So feet on the floor, feel your feet on the floor. I actually love to interview or do presentations barefoot so that I can actually really feel my toes on the floor, feel that grounding, feel that I'm being supported by the ground and the earth. Feel the weight of yourself on your seat. If you happen to be sitting, if you are standing up, then just feel the weight of your feet on the floor, of the floor holding you. Tall back, not rigid, but dignified. A posture that signals to your body that there is a dignity in the way that you're meeting the world. You might want to tuck your chin just ever so slightly to elongate the neck. And then think about your front body as a soft, warm, open place. You may want to relax your abdominal muscles. I know we tend to kind of tense those up a little bit. Relaxing the abdominal muscles is also going to facilitate breath work. And from this place of a grounded body, take in 2 or 3 normal breaths through the nose. So breathing through the nose to help you regulate the velocity of your breath. So very normal and intentional. If you can elongate your out breath a little bit more than your in breath, that'll help. Activate your parasympathetic nervous system, so our rest and digest. If you want to hum a little bit on your out breath, that's a bonus that actually stimulates the vagus nerve at the back of your throat. Now call into mind the resources that you have at your disposal. So what are things that you know that you can lean on? What are capabilities, qualities of yourself, things that you can stand in? Who are some people in your lives that are supportive of you, that have your back? What are some things in your physical surroundings that give you a sense of safety and support? As you're doing this exercise, you may notice that thoughts creep in, distractions, and that's very, very natural, especially if you haven't practiced mindfulness or contemplative practice. Just notice those thoughts and just let them float by, and bring your attention back to this exercise, back to the feeling of your feet on the floor, your breath in your chest or in your stomach or in your nostrils, and this knowledge that you have resources at your disposal. that you are resourced. What did you notice about this exercise? What are you noticing? And you can feel free to write it in the chat or just call to mind anything that you're noticing about dropping into this green zone. Now, some people drop into the green zone a little bit more quickly, especially if you have an established practice. Sometimes everybody has a different green zone set point. So that's why I kind of ground this in getting to know your green zone and what that might look like. Just taking a look at the messages here, relaxed and focused, clarity, peaceful confidence, slowed down mind. Yeah. So the green zone is a place of responsiveness as opposed to reactivity. So it is that that place where we can take just a millisecond pause and be with what's happening in our environment, respond to it from a place of confidence, peace, clarity, knowing that we are resourced in some fundamental way. Whereas a reactive state would be characteristic of the red zone, where we are more chaotic. We're more just reacting to what's happening in our environment without any space to think about how we want to be intentional and how we want to show up. All right, we're going to dive into the tools here. I'm thinking about this green zone state as one that the tools will help us access in the moment. So when you find yourself in a situation that you are aware that will probably trigger some of those red zones, some of that reactivity, these exercises will be things that you can literally drop into in the moment. Most of them are pretty subtle, so you can be doing them while you're in the conversation. And just inviting yourself back to more of that green zone, more of that place of responsiveness, of calm confidence, of peace. Just looking at the chat here, calm allows me to push away distraction and focus, centered. Yeah. So a couple of notes about these 10 exercises. There are actually a few dozen, so I just picked 10 as an introduction. Half of them are focused on the cognitive or top down. So the way you're looking at your environment, the way you're looking at a stressor, or the way you're thinking about it, I should say. The other half are bottom up or somatic embodied exercises. And they're both super important. One isn't better than the other, but really most of the research that we're seeing now, and certainly from my personal experience and that of my clients, combining both the bottom up, the somatic or the embodied physical practices and the cognitive are really where you optimize your ability to really get in and stay in that green zone. These, as I mentioned, these are in the moment tools, so they're not a substitute for those lifestyle choices that we know are really supportive of being able to meet what happens to us with that sense of calm and ground and being at choice. So things like nutrition, sleep, exercise, strong, healthy relationships. There was a study out of Harvard, a long-term study where it looked at people for 50 years over their entire lifespan. And the single most, by far, the single greatest predictor of happiness was people who had healthy relationships, who had love in their life, who had some intimate connections that felt supportive and that felt good. So that those are without a doubt super important to helping to access this green zone. The other thing I'll say is that you won't love all of these. So just pick a couple that are interesting to you and give yourself a week or so to practice them. And practice outside of a stressful situation. So, the best time to learn to ski is not during a snowstorm. That being said, if you're in a snowstorm, you can learn to ski, and so you could use some of these techniques. But my recommendation is to really start practicing them while you're outside of a stressful situation, so that they start to become this muscle memory. And the last thing that I'll say is this isn't a substitute for therapy. So coaching is not therapy. And while a lot of these tools, especially the cognitive or top-down tools, borrow from therapeutic techniques for folks who have anxiety disorders or trauma, best managed with a psychological or psychiatric conversation, in addition to possibly using some of these techniques. All right, let's get into them. First tool, like I said, we're gonna
I'm sorry, quick question. I don't mean to interrupt, but is there a presentation that you're sharing?
No.
Oh, okay.
Well, there isn't. Thank you for asking.
Okay.
No, I'm just yeah,
Okay.
I'm just chatting. I will say, though, that I do have a printable placard. So if I'll put my email address in the chat, and as a follow-up, if you want to message me, I can send you a little printable placard to stick on your wall or stick on your desk. All right, so the first tool is a top-down one, is the cognitive one, and that's a mindset of curiosity. And so I think in stressful situations, in particular, those that are interviews, presentations, conversations that involve relationships with other people, it is very common to be internally focused, which makes sense for a lot of reasons. The mindset of curiosity brings you out of that sort of egocentric focus and into being curious about the world, which, when you think about curiosity, just take a minute and think about something that you're curious about, whether it's related to work, personal, anything. I find, and I know for a lot of my clients, they find that there is this openness around curiosity, this possibilities, this expansive kind of a feeling that comes with being curious. And it can be in the moment, it can be an antidote to getting in that red zone, to feeling that sense of stress. And we're going to talk a little bit about catastrophizing and ruminating and those things that can bring us out of the moment. Delightfully curious. I love that, Misty. Yes, absolutely. I keep this guy on my desk to remind me of the power of curiosity. So I got a little Curious George ride along here. The second tool, and this is going to be a physiological one, is breath work, is breathing. And so the one that I'll recommend is really simple, and we did it during the green zone drop-in, and that is called 4-6 breathing, sometimes called 4-5-6 breathing. I like to keep it simple and call it 4-6 or do a 4-6, which is at least one breath, but 3 is recommended, where you breathe into a count of 4 and out to a count of 6. The numbers don't actually matter. What really matters is that the out breath is longer than the in breath. And what that does is our exhalation triggers the parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest and digest, in contrast to the sympathetic arm of the nervous system, which is fight or flight. So sympathetic is red zone, to oversimplify. Parasympathetic is green zone. So there are several breathing techniques that help facilitate that parasympathetic state, and 4-6 is one of the most simple. So it's simply, again, ideally through the nose, because breathing through the nose is much healthier for many reasons. And also it helps modulate the amount of air you're taking in. So if you think about kind of an anxiety response where you might be hyperventilating or even sub-hyperventilating, typically that's taking in a lot of oxygen, and that's triggering our red zone, or that's moving us towards the red zone. So this 4-6 breathing can be something you can do in the moment to facilitate the green zone. The third tool, we're back to top down, so cognitive. And this one I found to be personally so powerful, which is a basic awareness of our cognitive biases. And the one that really comes into play here around the green zone and the red zone is a negativity bias. So we are programmed to look for danger. Our brains are wired, our factory settings, as I like to call them, are wired to keep us alive. Really, everything about the way we are kind of programmed to look at the world and interact with the world is exclusively to keep us alive, not to make us happy, not to have us, experience life in the fullest way that we know we can. We're wired for a hostile environment, which is what our brains were designed to manage before we developed all of this security and technology and all of these wonderful things where we know we're safe most of the time. So having an awareness of the fact that our brains will naturally by default scan for danger, that dangerous signals or negative situations are more powerful. So the brain wants you to learn from the negative because it wants to keep you alive. So it will actually internalize negative stimuli much more powerfully than it does positive. So the latest research is showing that about a 5 to 7 to 1 ratio is where our brains need to look at positive versus negative stimuli in order to help us rewire and use that neuroplasticity to start looking at the world in a way that's more friendly versus kind of that default looking for danger. There's another bias that I'll mention, which is, so this tool is just being aware of our cognitive biases, being aware of the shortcuts, the ways that our brain is designed to look at the world and process all of the information coming in, and knowing that that's not necessarily accurate. It's just it's a bias, it's a heuristic, it's a shortcut. And so being in the green zone is really having that awareness that the world isn't as dangerous as your brain has been programmed to believe in order to keep you alive. There's also there are about 20 cognitive biases that have been well studied, and I'm really fascinated in this area. And I think the two that are interesting in relationship to stressful situations and the green zone, red zone is binary thinking. So we, in order to simplify the world, we think of things as either, and this is overgeneralizing, but we think of things as terrible or wonderful. Very, very polar in the way that we look at the world. And that just makes the world easier to process. But what it also does is it lends itself to us looking for those danger signals and then thinking that, and then playing that out to a potentially catastrophic result, which then leads to us moving out of the green zone and into the red zone. The fourth tool is posture. Not necessarily the power pose, although certainly that is something that can be utilized. And many people have found a lot of value in taking a posture of something that feels powerful, something that feels confident. Your brain takes cues from your body, just like the breath work that we talked about. With the posture, what I like to suggest in terms of the green zone, so that green zone is connected with safety and security and groundedness, is thinking about, certainly you can have the dignified posture in your spine, is to invite an open front body. So one that kind of lends itself to that curiosity we talked about, and that openness. Which will signal to your brain that this is a safe environment, which it generally is, assuming that's true, right? All of this is caveated on you actually being in a safe environment, but most so-called stressful situations in the modern world are actually fairly safe from a physical standpoint. our brains are just interpreting that danger. And so just to kind of let that stomach be open, let the heart be open, let that receptivity and responsiveness of your body signal to your brain that this is a safe situation. And use that to invite the more of that green zone. The next tool is noticing your thoughts. This was one of the most powerful things that I learned from meditation practice. Well, first of all, that meditation doesn't mean clearing your mind of thoughts, at least the type of meditation that I practice. It means being aware of your thoughts without being enrolled in them. So thinking is wonderful. It's awesome. It's beautiful. It's this amazing human thing that we do that makes us so special. And we have a tendency to believe everything we think. And that can get us into trouble, especially when you think about the cognitive biases that we have. And so I love to just borrow a little bit from the meditation practice that I do and notice when my thoughts are triggering a physiological response. That's what tells me in some cases that my thoughts might not be serving my purpose. Are they true? I don't know. But I do know that I have a tendency to get enrolled in my thoughts, as many people do. And just having an awareness of your thoughts as another sense, as a sixth sense, if you will. And that we don't have to kind of jump down all those rabbit holes with them. This is a practice that's really helpful to do outside of a stressful moment. To build this practice, to build this muscle, to build this capacity to be aware of your thoughts without sort of jumping into the stew with them. The next tool, so this is the sixth tool. And again, we're going back and forth between these top-down techniques and these bottom-up techniques. So this is a bottom-up, this is a somatic or a embodied technique. Again, for getting into and staying in that green zone, that place of responsiveness. So it's feeling your feet on the floor. And we started the green zone grounding with that. What happens when we're in the red zone is that our thoughts become chaotic. We leave the present moment and we start either catastrophizing about the future or ruminating about the past. And so the feet on the floor is simply using a physical sensation to come back to this present moment where nothing is really happening. When we think about stressful situations, it's often what's so challenging about them is what we think they mean and how we're projecting into the future or borrowing from the past. And so using any physical sensation, actually, or you could use any of your senses, but feet on the floor is a good one. Because it also kind of reminds you of that groundedness that's part of that exercise we did to really drop into the green zone. The next tool, so the seventh tool, I personally just love this one. And I have to say that these are all borrowed from very variety of sources of people who have spent lifetimes studying the way people interact with their environment and figuring out tools and techniques to help them improve that. So the next is to know your three. So know your three qualities, your ways of being in the world that are unique to you, the things that you bring to the world that no one else brings in that measure or in that combination. So for me, my three are curiosity, enthusiasm, and playfulness. And so when I'm in a conversation, in particular one where it feels like it's an evaluation, I ground myself in the knowledge that in addition to the sort of hard skills that I have, I also know that no one else can combine those hard skills with the three qualities of being in the world that I have in that measure and in that combination. So I would love for each of you to just take a minute and write down 2 qualities, 2 things that you know about yourself, that you bring to the world, that you're proud of, that you're excited about. And if you want to share them in the chat, I'd love to see them, but they can be just for you. Again, these are not skills, these are qualities, these are ways of being. Stephanie says passion and optimism. Oh, Stefan, sorry, excuse me, Stefan. Optimism and empathy. Loving energy and connectedness. Positive energy and fun, kind and thoughtful. Practical creativity combined with proactive initiative. Beautiful. Caring and outgoing. Positive energy, kindness. Wonderful. Awesome. Stand in those things. And you'll notice that I said, know your 3, and I asked you for 2. I invite you to reach out to someone today who knows you fairly well and ask them what quality they notice in you that they appreciate. I've heard it said that the question can be asked, what shows up when I do? What quality in the room shows up around me when I'm there? These are great. They're still coming. Trust and fun, caring, connecting and fun loving, giving of myself, humor and connecting. Fantastic. So when you combine those with your marketing, your accounting, your operations skills, no one can match that. No one brings that to the table. And if that's not something, if we're talking in an interview context, if that's not something that an organization is looking for, then it's not a good fit. But you can ground yourself in the knowledge that you are bringing those things so uniquely to the world and to a potential position that you're interviewing for, that you're looking at, that you're curious about finding out more. Okay, the next one is, I call it surfing your experience. So noticing any uncomfortable feelings that come up. And we talked about sort of awareness of your thoughts, your cognitive biases, right? This awareness. So it's being aware of when you move from the green zone into the red zone. So when you feel overwhelmed, anxious, what's happening? In particular, what's happening in your body? What might you notice? Elevated heart rate. You might feel your face flushed. My hands tend to tingle when I get nervous. And just being curious about that. Noticing how the mind wants to create a story around the things that we feel in our body. And then once we create the story, then our body says, oh, I've got this story that I'm nervous or that I'm anxious or that I'm overwhelmed. So I better produce the chemicals and the reactions in the body that prepare myself for reacting to that, for typically a fight or flight, because that's all the body can really do is activate that energy for fight or flight. So by just noticing and getting curious and maybe even fascinated by the reaction, by the sensations in your body, allow you to detach a little bit, allow you to be responsive to those sensations rather than sort of getting enrolled in them and again creating this story and creating this feedback loop. Yeah, I find this one to be really, really powerful. It is challenging. And so the thing that I would suggest is that you start with a positive emotion. So as you practice this outside of practice skiing outside of the snowstorm, start with something joyful, either that happens real time or that you can think of some happy memory, somebody in your life that makes you laugh or that you feel tenderly towards. And notice that feeling and just be with the feeling and let the story go. And that can be a very, very powerful practice for navigating stressful situations and staying in that green zone of responsiveness. The next tool, so we are on the last top-down tool, cognitive tool, which is reframing. So as I mentioned, some of this borrows, a lot of this borrows from psychology, from therapeutic approaches, cognitive behavioral therapy. One of the hallmarks is reframing. So looking at your situation, and I find it helpful to actually name the perspective that I have. So it could be something like, I have to go to this interview, or I have to, nail this conversation. And thinking of what might be another perspective. So you could think of, I get to have this conversation, or I get to be in this room, or I get to even if I get to experience this human situation, or anything in between. So something that's just another perspective. And what that does is not only helps to calm you physically, but it also just reinforces that that knowledge that we are choosing how to interpret our environment. Those choices are sometimes don't feel easy because they are based on years and years and decades of history and kind of wiring, kind of wearing a groove in our mind of how we've habitually responded to things. But just being open to the knowledge that we could frame something in a different way can be really, really powerful. The last tool is a physiological one, and that is a hand on the heart. And so if you feel comfortable putting your hand on your heart space, maybe take a couple of breaths into that heart space, about 20 seconds. And what that does is actually signals to your body to release oxytocin, which is a hormone that is associated with safety and connection. That's why hugs feel so good. And you can do this for yourself. Those are your 10 tools. As I mentioned, I do have a printable placard that I'm happy to send to anybody. I will drop my email in the chat here. I am curious if anyone found one of those in particular either surprising or one that you think might be particularly helpful for you. The last one. Good and very easy. Does anybody have any questions? We've got a few minutes left here. Hand over heart, the posture.
So Amy, you said so many things that and I took several notes because it's like I can't wait to get the placard. I think something that I can use for reference. The hand on the heart, I've been practicing. Actually, I've been tapping into just my own energy and just checking on a regular basis, just because I'm working with a client and it's extremely stressful. So I find that it's allowing me to ground a little bit more with my hand on my heart, especially as I focus on gratitude and just helping this organization through some really difficult challenges. But it's interesting how that's helping me. You said a couple things that are just really profound in my mind. It's, to pay attention to how resourced you are. So just saying, I am resourced. That was interesting to me. And then I loved the whole thing, the recognition that we do a lot of binary thinking.
Yeah.
That was fascinating. But you said something, and I'm going to use this with people. It's like, don't get enrolled in your thoughts, right? Oh my gosh, that's brilliant. It's like, how many times do we just get enrolled in our thoughts? And it's a good way to call it out. That's not like, you're thinking or stinking thinking. It's,
Yeah.
hey, I'm getting enrolled in my thoughts. And I really like the whole thought about the 3 qualities that I bring to the world.
Hmm.
And I don't know, as maybe it's as I get older, I know what I want to bring to the world, and it's doing a check on that every time. And am I bringing what I should be bringing to the world? Am I, or to the interaction? And then the parasympathetic, it's like making sure that we're not in fight or flight, that we're in that most peaceful energy. Who else has questions? We have Amy. Let's take advantage of it.
I will also say that if you email me at that address, I will do a free 45-minute consultation. You can use that to either answer or ask questions, or if you would be interested in maybe working together one-on-one, can certainly talk about that and do a little spot coaching.
And we'll send that out with the group, with the recording, and along with your placard as well. John will do that. Patricia.
Yes. So not so much as relating to the techniques, but just if you don't mind me asking a question about interviewing in general.
Sure.
Because I actually have one this afternoon. Any tips on how to make the interview more conversational as opposed to just transactional?
Yeah. Yeah. What's worked for you in the past?
Well, interviewing is proving to be my Achilles heel. So
Patricia, you can, you're getting enrolled in your thoughts.
I know.
Well, I think, I mean, in the most empathetic way, I think it's easy to sort of paint a broad brush on the interview process when it hasn't led to the desired outcome. And so that's the reason I asked, like, what's worked? If you think about a time, even during one interview where it felt more conversational, what were the conditions that created that?
Well, it was kind of establishing that connection, but sometimes I just feel like it's kind of either there or not, right? Sometimes it's like immediate, right? You just feel the chemistry right away, kind of like dating, right? So, but that doesn't happen all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. So
maybe by asking questions.
yeah, I think.
But can you do that at the onset of an interview?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, an interview is as much about the relationship, maybe more about the relationship with the between both people. And so I would say being curious. I mean, I'm just such an advocate of that mindset of curiosity, and that that sense of openness. So yeah, asking questions. What comes to mind? What kind of questions might you ask?
Well, I think you have to be interested in the other person. So Amy, you hit the nail on the head when you build relationship. In that first 5 minutes, whether you're not into the transactional piece that Patricia mentioned, that you introduce yourself, whether it's over Zoom or it's in person. If it's in person, I think it's easier to establish a relationship, right? Yeah. And you're able to ask the person how their day's going before you get into the interview process. And if they're how do I say it? If they're also in a relationship building mode, that really kind of starts that conversation, which, brick by brick, you start building it before you get into the details of the interview. And I always think for me, that's really helpful.
Mm.
So Amy, there's a question. What was the tool right before reframing after your threes? I missed part of that.
What was it? Tool? Oh, surfing your experience, surfing your
Ooh.
comfortable feelings. And I recommended practicing that by surfing something comfortable, so that you get, you're not kind of dealing with two things, which is potentially getting enrolled in that uncomfortable feeling and that storytelling.
In putting together some of your suggestions, and as it relates to Patricia or anybody when they're interviewing, it's like to get grounded in that feeling of being fully resourced. And then the breathing. I mean, look at all these tools that you need that cheat sheet before your interview, Patricia. And just making sure that you're not getting enrolled in your thoughts. Hey, I'm putting all your learnings to work with Patricia, right?
I love it. You're brilliant.
And then that just that feeling of, is it a video one?
Yes,
Oh,
it is.
it is. Okay, so just that hand on your heart, because can you see my hand on my heart? Maybe no. So you can have it, and that's the kind of cool thing about a video interview, right? I like that. And
I would say one other thing is sort of reframing what's happening. So I think there are things you can do, Patricia, to encourage, and some of the things we've talked about, and there've been some good thoughts thrown out. I think there's some things in chat as well. And I would say noticing your perspective on a transactional interview and thinking about reframing that. Because it might be what it is. There are people, and I've been in interviews like this where somebody is just, that's what they're doing. And so, rather than fighting it, if it becomes, apparent that that's what's happening, is okay, well, what's good about a transactional interview? What can I learn? What can I experience?
Yeah.
Somebody asked a question, is a good way to work off excess adrenaline? Oh, I love this one. I just had to do this yesterday. So there's a great practice, which is, so there's actually, you can literally shake it through, and animals do this when they have their sympathetic activated, and they don't actually release all of that adrenaline and cortisol through the interaction. But there's twisting your body like this can work through some of that adrenaline and cortisol.
that is that part of the somatic training that you've done?
It is. Yeah.
It's interesting, and I haven't gotten very deep into it, but it's really interesting about the somatics, the study of somatics, and I think so much of it is intuitive, but I love what you're what you're doing, because I do think just some gentle movements can, I didn't correlate, or I didn't kind of think that animals, because you're right, they do shake it off.
Yeah, there's this wonderful book by a professor out of Stanford called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And the idea is that because animals are, constantly processing through in this very tactical, straightforward way what's happening in their environment. So the zebra's in the green zone all the time until it's not.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. That's interesting. Hey, one last question for Amy. Anybody? Is this why dogs shake themselves? It seems like it,
It's
Frederick.
absolutely 100%. Yep.
Crazy. That's crazy. Well, Amy, thank you so incredibly
Oh,
much.
it was an
I
honor.
am so appreciative of you, and you have some really practical things. And we're gonna have you again and talk about the somatic stuff that you're doing. I think
Oh, I
it'd
would
be
love
great.
to.
So reach out to Amy. We'll send the recording along with Amy's cheat sheet, and then make sure we'll make sure that well, you put a link in it, right? In the chat. We'll send it out also.
Yeah.
And but thank you, Amy, and thank you all.
you.
So we are getting together again on May 5th, and we have, who's our speaker? Alicia Engel, and that's another one that Cyrus introduced us to. Cyrus, thank you very much. And so we're going to see you next week, and enjoy the weekend. Think about staying in the green zone. I know I am, and we'll see you next Friday. And don't hesitate to reach out to Amy if you have any questions, or want to take her up on that 45-minute call with her. And it's always a pleasure to talk to Amy. So you won't be disappointed, I'm sure. And then we'll see you next Friday. Thank you all.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
So
Yeah.
much.
Bye, Patricia.
Thank you.
Great to see all of you. Thank you, Christy and team.
Thank you, Amy.